I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Very good.
Was that one of the surprises?
Yes.
Oh.
Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, Mabel, Oliver, and Charles look into who killed actor Ben Gilroy live on stage. Or was it in the elevator? TV's favorite fictional podcasters are back for season 3 of Only Murders in the Building. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of the These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
Also with us is private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author of the Piper Green series of cozy mysteries, Laura Bricker. Hey, Laura.
Hey, Rebecca. I'm in my most talk to me outfit today for private investigating so that I look like a sympathetic ear for people to talk to.
Oh, that's when you wear a floral shirt instead of like a scary black,
yes,
polo shirt. You look like a Karen instead of like a Karen.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And finally, our resident Doubting Thomas, the author of the City Trilogy of novels, host of the Strange Arrivals podcast, and our Patreon Deep Dive Book Club podcast host, Toby Ball. Hey, Toby.
Hey, Rebecca.
All right. So, Kevin, this is obviously our midweek show.
Yeah, I like how you call it that. It's a midweek show. It's a special edition.
Special edition.
Hot off the presses.
That's right. We're not releasing on Thursday.
The hottest of our hot takes.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever released a show on a Wednesday before, have we?
Not since 2018 or something like that.
Okay, so what is coming out on next Monday's program?
Yeah, next Monday we're going to be talking about the Netflix documentary series Who Killed Jill Dando? Or, as I've been writing it everywhere, Who Killed Jan Dando? But it's Jill Dando.
Okay, it is Jill Dando, eh?
Yeah.
Okay, I was wondering, what are you saying where it's not what you wrote down?
Oh, yeah, I still have time to correct. You don't have to tell everybody that.
Jan
They can
Dando
see
better
stuff,
watch
but
her
they can't-
back.
Yeah, they can't see the script. Jesus.
I think you said Jan Dando last week, right?
Probably.
Jan Dando is pretty worried right now because she's still alive.
There's a poor Jan Dando. What the fuck?
Am I gonna die?
It's like when Tron came out again, and the lead character in Tron, his name is Kevin Flynn, and I guess he disappears at the end of the first Tron, and there was this big guerrilla marketing campaign, which was like, Kevin Flynn lives. And I'm like, I know.
Where is Kevin Flynn?
I know.
He's right here. Oh my God. I'm just thinking about all of our listeners, like in the UK, who must have been like, you guys are morons.
Stupid.
There was the biggest, she was like the Katie Couric of England. It's Jill, not Jan. All right.
Investigating O.J. Sampson. Jeez.
On Crime Stoppers.
Crime Stoppers, yeah.
All right. Well, we have a lot to do tonight. And the main thing we have to do is talk about a program that we've talked about twice before on the show.
This is the third time, huh?
I know. Should we get
Yeah.
right to it?
Let's get right to it.
All right. Leading off. Roll it.
Is there any foam around his mouth? Foaming would indicate poisoning.
I only saw blood.
Mabel, what are you doing? Could be natural causes or one of those rupture things.
Charles, please, it's opening night and a big star in the prime of his life drops dead on stage.
When we last stage at the premiere of Oliver's new Broadway show, but a very much alive Ben returns from the hospital, only to plummet to his death in the Arconia's elevator shaft.
I didn't realize you were going to the funeral.
Why would I not go to the funeral?
Well, I mean, it's more of a fancy who's who kind of thing. And you know, you and Ben.
Had a complicated but ultimately copacetic working relationship.
I hope you gave the police a better performance than whatever that was.
I gave them an honest statement, not to mention a complete list of alibi witnesses and a doctor's note saying I'm too weak to kill. Ow.
Who among the cast and crew would want Ben dead? Oliver fears the show will tank if it's a cast member like the alluring Loretta Durkin, whom he's crushing on. Charles is struggling with both his love life and the musical's patter song. Meanwhile, Mabel is leaving the Arconia and feels disconnected from the guys. As she moves forward on the podcast without them, can this trio reunite and solve the latest murder in the building?
You know what this calls for?
Want to make a podcast with me?
Oh my God, this is corny.
So
I know it is.
so corny.
But it was good. It was
fun.
cute.
Yeah, it's cute.
Murder?
Yeah, murder. Yeah.
Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez return in season 3 of Hulu's Only Murders in the Building. Meryl Streep and Paul Rudd round out the cast. The show turns its focus away from true crime podcasts to musical theater, while providing another group of oddball suspects to investigate. Spoiler alert, we are going to be talking about plot points from Only Murders in the Building season 3. So if you want to remain spoiler free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes for our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. Now, Kevin, we should mention we are actually doing this discussion in front of some listeners, right?
That's right. We have a live audience here of patrons who are watching on Crowdcast. Apologies to those who are having technical difficulties and couldn't get in to see us. We will find a way to make this video available to you guys as well.
So, Toby, you have a really funny take on this show. It's like tasteful with exceptions, right?
Yeah, it's kind of the very tasteful show where people say fuck a lot. Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like the show doesn't change a whole lot between seasons. Like it doesn't. What makes the show distinctive has made it distinctive over the course of 3 seasons. It's the way it looks. It's the quality of the acting. It's this sort of, like I said, like it's sort of cozy, but like just a tiny little bit of an edge here and there. But for the most part, that their relationship with each other might have like slight ups and downs within a season, but it essentially remains constant. And so it just kind of comes down to like the details of these murders, and they're they feel like they're almost besides the point, because what you're really doing is you're watching Steve Martin and Martin Short and
Selena Gomez.
Selena Gomez go about their business with a whole bunch of other really good actors in these beautiful sets, and so that's kind of what makes the show what it is. So now that we're talking about it the third time, it's like, what made this season distinctive from the other ones? And I think there's a few things, but it does make it more of a challenge than like almost anything else we do, where you can just start from scratch.
Well, there's one big thing that made the season distinctive. And Laura, that big thing is Oscar-winning actress Meryl Streep. What do you think of the addition to Meryl Streep to the cast of Only Murders in the Building?
I think that made this season of Only Murders in the Building. And I think, we've got Meryl Streep, who is just an amazing, she's like an icon. And the irony is we have her in this role of this aspiring actress who has been waiting for her big break for her whole career. She's been waiting for somebody to say to her, "Where have you been?" Crazy cat lady. Thanks, Kevin. Waiting for somebody to say, "Where have you been all my life?" And it finally happens. And I think that sort of the ironic play on having Meryl Streep of her caliber and her career in real life playing this character on Only Murders in the Building, who is who has been, working their whole career, who is now, later in age, finally getting their break. But I think you've got a fantastic dynamic, which kind of surprised me a little bit, between her and Martin Short. I like when you see the two of them together, you're like, I'm not thinking like, oh, this is going to be a big romantic dynamic, but it really worked. And there was some scenes between the two of them that I just thought were fantastic. When she's trying to cook for him in her teeny tiny apartment and like burning her pork chops by trying to cook them in the microwave or whatever, smoking their joint on the purple tissue paper from like studio, whatever, somebody's birthday party that they were both at like decades before. And I'm like, and you're gonna smoke that weed? Okay. But I think that really brought this season just up to a whole different level for me, having Meryl Streep in there.
You know, it did for me too. And what was interesting was that while I was watching this season of Only Murders in the Building, I also listened to Tom Lake, the audiobook version of the Anne Patchett novel, which is like the latest Anne Patchett novel. And Meryl Streep actually reads the audiobook for Tom Lake. I would recommend that anybody who is a fan of any of Anne Patchett's writing listen to that audiobook. Meryl Streep's audiobook performance is incredible. And she also is reading the part of an actress in that book. And so listening to that and watching this at the same time was like an incredible kind of like meta experience. They play two very, very different, she plays two very different roles in those two pieces of media. But one of the things that she does in this piece of media, Kevin, is that she plays an actress who can sing, and there's actually real musical scoring in this season of Only Murders in the Building that is pretty extraordinary. How do you think the musical scoring works?
Yeah, I think that works actually very, very well. And, you know, if it doesn't, it kind of takes away from like what's really happening, you know, with how the show works. I know Toby, actually, I think it was one of our good listeners here, Jeff, who pointed out like the musical team behind these different songs. They did Dear Evan Hansen. So it wasn't just like, hey, let's just put a couple of folks together and hope that, you know, there'll be goofy songs.
It wasn't the Flight of the Conchords dudes.
No.
Yeah.
They were actually really, really good. And I think like they needed to be to sort of lend it not only to the, you know, the believability that, you know, this is really happening and that they could be successful in all this, but also to make it enjoyable. Because what's really happening here is as we pivot away from the show, or at least the season being about them as podcasters, we have to, you know, they're like, you know, moving into the sort of like expressing their joy for musical theater. And that has to be good. Right. And so, and that's fine. And we can talk about like, okay, there wasn't a lot of podcast in this, and that's, you know, yeah, so we can get into that. But when they embraced the musical theater aspects of the show, you know, I didn't know if I was going to like this in the beginning, because it actually took a couple of episodes for them to say, oh, this is going to be a musical. And so then you get all this joy from the music. But I mean, if the music wasn't good, then it like really would, you know, make the rest of the season really suffer.
Yeah, it wouldn't work. And Toby, I think it's hard to, I mean, obviously Meryl Streep has her Lighthouse song, but it is hard to ignore the fact that Steve Martin has an incredibly climactic scene in this show, because he's obviously having all these problems on stage, delivering his big patter number. He keeps going into, you know, the white room over and over and over again.
I love the white room.
But then we finally get to see him do it start to finish, which to me was like the apex of the season. What did you think of Steve Martin's performance finally delivering that Pickwick Triplets song?
Yeah, so you know, as I've said many times, like Steve Martin's like my favorite sort of entertainer type. So it's always cool to see like yet another thing that he does really well. So yeah, I mean, I guess he does it twice all the way through. Once he's doing it at the rehearsal in Martin Short's apartment, and the second time is on stage. And it's just, you know, it's like I couldn't do it. So it's really that was fun to watch. I also liked his police uniform.
In the finale,
people should pick up on that more in local police departments.
What, they're covered with glitter, top to bottom?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I loved it. I loved. They all had glittery outfits in the finale episode. It made me so happy.
The four of them did. Yes, the four, like the, you know,
Yeah.
the three of them, the three central characters did. They had their, you know why?
Why?
Because they were the Rolling Stones of podcasts. Just kidding. The Beatles of podcasts. Duh.
I know.
One of the things that you point out, Laura, that's really interesting to me is like loneliness being really a central theme in the show. And
yeah.
So you can talk about that?
Yeah. And I think, you know, if you look at all three seasons of this show, Obviously, we have the humor, we have the quirky characters, but underneath that, there is this theme of loneliness, living alone in the city. And in the first 2 seasons, that's really centered in the Arconia, where we have, for the most part, people living alone in their New York City apartments. And in this season, we have, I think, the loneliness in the theater. And at one point, we have that character that's like living in the theater by themselves again. And like, just kind of, this is what they're doing. And I think, when you look at all of these characters that, especially our main characters, they were all alone. We have Mabel, who's living alone, big giant, her aunt's apartment. You've got Martin Short's character, who is living alone, eating like pints and pints of hummus and dip because, he can't afford to go eat anymore.
Laura, I'm going to stop you. We're having that issue with your microphone. You're going, it's going like this. It's going up and down and up and down.
It's like surfing a wave of audio.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm holding it steady right now.
If
I've
you
got
could,
my cursor on it.
Yeah.
Because what happens is it just sort of spontaneously goes up and there's like no warning to it. Okay, so I'm going to hold my cursor right there.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know why it's doing that. That is so crazy. So basically,
it's still happening.
It's still happening. Yeah.
Are you've got your mouse and you're manually holding the
Yeah, I'm manually
gain?
holding the recording volume so that it doesn't jump up.
Weird.
Okay, so now I'm holding it now I'm holding it with my finger down.
Do that.
Okay. So that's
I know it's a pain, but you got to do that.
Okay, so I'm holding my finger down. Do you need me to just start over?
Nope. You can get to, he's living in his apartment, eating his hummus and dips. If you don't know where
Okay,
you
yeah. And then, we have Martin Short's character who's living alone. Obviously there was the scenes in prior seasons where he is, trying to reconnect with his son because he's estranged. It really feels like he's estranged. And this season, the theme of loneliness transitions into all of these 3 main characters now finding love, or at least temporary love in the season. So trying on something other than living alone with Robert, the stupidest name ever. Taubert and Meryl Streep. And then we have the crazy lady Joy and her fish and her Kama Sutra things. But I do think that loneliness, back to that, kind of lends itself to finding a connection with each other, being citizen sleuths. That's sort of the outlet that these people find when they are seeking that human connection.
Kevin, what do you think about the chemistry between the 3 of these actors this time around? I mean, they've been working together now for a while, right? We've got Martin Short, Selena Gomez, and Steve Martin. But I think about, Steve Martin is obviously going to be excellent in any. I feel like you could put him in with a slug, and he would still, make something outstanding out of it. But there's chemistry is really necessary, and I think throwing Selena Gomez into the mix was an interesting choice in season 1. So how do you think it's going?
Oh, I think it's great. I think the 3 of them, it kind of reminds me a little bit of a jazz trio, right? Because I feel like Martin and Short are like the rhythm section, and Selena Gomez is like, a great saxophone or a piano where it's giving this melody, and it's just different, punches through, but also is excellent. I mean, I just find when she's on the screen, I'm just always sort of mesmerized. She also has to kind of lean into Laura's theme here of loneliness and melancholy, which we've talked about in the previous seasons, that like her facial expressions, just, she like just conveys that in this very easy way. And of course the 2 of them are also the other 2, the 2 old guys are just really great. I know there was this recent kerfluffle on social media about Martin Short.
You mean Dan Coy's terrible take on Martin Short and Slate?
Yeah, and then it just sort of engendered this lovely backlash, which is just support for Martin Short when you just sort of like quietly look at the breadth of his career. And I think I get when they say sometimes his characters are very broad and you wonder if he's overacting, but here I just feel like he embraces that character really so well, and he never goes over the top with it. I mean, the character's written to go, to 11, and he'll get to 10 or 11, but he's not going to go like way over that and sort of ruin the scene. And Steve Martin, of course, is just like Toby says, is great. He's a delight. If anything more, I wish they could have done a little more with him this season, because he really brought this great emotional depth to the first 2 seasons. I don't know if we're really supposed to care about him and Joy.
No.
I don't know if we really like Joy, and so we're supposed to be upset that he doesn't have Joy in his life. And of course, who didn't think like the fish was going to get flushed the second it went in the
Chekhov's fish.
Yeah, but Chekhov's fish. But he just what I say, he can just play the disrespected actor so well. So the 3 of them are great, and they've been nominated for Golden Globes and Emmy Awards, and it's super well deserved.
So, Toby, there is another theme that sort of emerges in this season, and that is a theme of like the maternal theme. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, I mean, if you've watched it, it's pretty clear. I don't know, starting with like episode 8 or something, that's like sort of a theme that maybe hasn't been so noticeable beforehand, but is sort of the key to unlocking the mystery and solution and all that. So that's, I thought that was an interesting and good way of doing it, in that you didn't, like, I think a lot of people would feel like, well, we have to introduce the theme early so that it continues throughout the whole thing, and whatever. And you really don't get that very much. Like, I mean, it takes a while for you to even realize that Meryl Streep has a child, right? So yeah, I thought that was good. It does signal who the culprit is, maybe a slight bit earlier than would be ideal. But in all honesty, you're not watching this necessarily for a shocking finale, right? You're watching it to see all these really good actors have fun and interact and just this sort of weirdly mannered, it's just not like other things, right? So it's sort of the rhythm of it and all that. So yeah, it kind of struck me that something that's like, oh shit, yeah, well, I guess that's the theme, or that's one of the big themes.
Yeah, it's sort of, there has always been sort of this, I guess, parental theme that has run through it. If you think about fathers and sons in the, certainly in season 2, that was there. Certainly, it's about caring. One of the big ways that you can take care of somebody is to support them on Patreon.
Oh, it was smooth.
Yeah.
Very smooth, Kevin.
I'm just saying, I don't want to pander.
Yeah, you don't want to pander.
But, I mean, that is kind of what we're doing here. We're pandering a little bit. We're in the business section.
We are in the business. Toby, that's what this music is. That's the business section music. In case you were wondering.
Nice. Yeah, I just kind of checked out for a minute.
Surprise.
So I didn't notice.
Yeah. Fantastic. So right now what we got going on Patreon is, you could already have seen this episode of Crime Writers on Crowdcast, which we made available to our patrons, at least to the patrons who didn't have technical difficulties.
I know, but it's going to be available after, right?
It is, and we'll have to do this again as a sort of a makeup.
Yes. Maybe with a different platform.
Maybe we'll have to do it that way. We'll figure out how we could do it.
Yeah.
But you also could get episodes of Crime Writers on early and ad free by joining us on Patreon. If you're not sure, you can try Patreon for free for 7 days. If you like it, you can check out the 400 plus podcast episodes that we have there. We have the latest Leave It to Bricker.
We do.
And this has been like a big crazy story in quaint AF Exeter. It deals with a dog who has been crapping downtown.
A horse.
Could be a horse.
Looks like
Yeah. So, Laura, what's the latest on that? Can you give us an update?
Well, the latest on that is I think that the word got out that I was on the case because I saw the key suspect. I saw their dog go poop. I saw them pick up after their dog. I have seen no giant dog poops downtown since I was canvassing the town trying to get to the bottom of this. So I think the word is out, which is good, but I have had some dog pee reports lately, so we're still on the case.
Well, I'm having some reports of you needing to continue to ride your levels on your microphone. Just FYI.
I'm holding it like right in the middle, and it's not even.
Just FYI.
I don't know what's going on.
That's
so
keep
weird.
Sitting forward in your seat and just keep an eye on your levels.
I am, and it's I'm holding it, and it's staying at the same volume, so I don't know.
That's better now. Okay.
That. Okay.
What else we got going? What else we got going on, Kevin?
Yeah, we also have an upcoming recording, which hopefully will have fewer technical issues, of Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast. Toby, you are going to be recording on the 16th of October, so folks who are Deep Dive members, they can watch and partake in the recording. What are we going to be hearing you discuss this time?
It's called A Death on W Street, The Murder of Seth Rich in the Age of Conspiracy by Andy Kroll.
Ooh.
And it's about people probably might remember this. This guy, Seth Rich, who was a DNC staffer, was killed on the street late at night in Washington, D.C., right off Capitol Hill. And
he was killed by the Clintons, right?
Yeah, you would think.
Why do you got to give it away, Rebecca?
That's right. That's what everybody thought. Everybody thought he was killed by the Clintons.
So it spawned like a lot of conspiracy theories, really made his family's life very, very difficult. And so I'm a little ways into it, but I imagine that's where it's going.
And who are your guests?
My guests are Chris Joyner.
Yay!
And Elise McGovern and Sarah Kalin.
Awesome. It's going to be a good panel.
Yeah, great panel.
Yep.
Elsewhere, usually we don't have two podcast drops on the same day, but also out now is the latest episode of These Are Their Stories, the Law & Order podcast. This time, we're looking at a classic SVU episode. This is great. This is from season 3. It's episode 10. It's called Ridicule. And it's special because it's Diane Neal has a guest appearance as a murder suspect. This is years before she joined the cast as Casey Novak. People will remember this case because it's the one where 3 women are accused of raping a male exotic dancer at a bachelorette party. And they have all these discussions about whether or not men can be raped or whether it's just a really great thing for them. Have a listen.
3 women at the same time, most guys would call that lucky.
So we're saying that men are sex hounds and only women can feel violated? That's gender bias.
Most women don't report rapes. What's his name?
Can't ask that question. Wouldn't ask a female victim.
We question female victims all the time.
Yeah, question them all the time.
Elliot Stabler is garbage in that episode, as usual. Elliot Stabler is always garbage. He's extra garbage in that episode. That episode shows me everything I hate about Elliot Stabler. You should listen to the podcast. Who's the guest on that one?
That is Natalie Grillo from the Obsessed Network.
Yeah,
and just a reminder, we're going to be at Obsessed Fest the end of the month. It's in Dallas, Texas. We'll be doing a live episode of These Are Their Stories.
That's right. So, Kevin, Kevin. Yeah. All right. Oh, yes. All right. So, Kevin, before we end the business section, do we have any Patreon patron saints of the week this week?
Our Patreon patron saints are Sam Westelman and Penny Kane.
Oh, Sam.
Bless you.
Sam and Penny. Bless you guys. Bless you guys for supporting us on Patreon. Thank you to everybody who supports us on Patreon. Thanks for everybody who listens to this and doesn't. I hope you consider doing so. There's lots of fun stuff back there. But if you're just a listener who muscles through the business section, we appreciate you too. Kevin, I'm going to go ahead and fade that music out right now. That means you got to fade the music out right now. And fair listeners who are watching this, the reason that I was confused there at the end is because I always forget whether or not it's a patron saint of the week time or not. And Kevin has to point it out real big to me on his.
I say get this.
All right.
Yeah.
So, Kevin, this mystery, I have to say, you thought you had it solved pretty early in the season. And
yeah,
I thought you did too. And I was very impressed. And I'm wondering if you would like to share your theory of the crime with the group, and so they can be so impressed with how smart you were, which did not end up being the mystery being solved.
Yeah, so I thought that, what happened was that Ben had a twin.
Why?
Because he was a child actor.
Yes.
And child actors usually come in pairs, twins. And then you had one Ben die on stage. You heard him say, like, they pronounced him. And then another Ben shows up and dies again. So it seems like, oh yeah, there were two of them. And I was really disappointed because I basically figured that out like episode 3, and I'm like, oh man, I can't believe I'd ruined the season for myself. But no, fortunately, that wasn't actually what happened.
Yeah, I thought you were onto something too, because Ben was talking to Steve Martin about like how they used to work together and how he was horrible to him.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's somehow going to play into it. That like Steve Martin didn't know that he was actually working with 2 kids.
Yeah.
Like Lindsay and Sydney Wagner from Little House on the Prairie, both playing Carrie.
Yeah, exactly like that.
FYI, guys, there were 2 of them.
Exactly like
there were
that.
2 of them.
Yeah.
So Laura Bricker, there is an incredible group of women that helps advance this story, and they belong to a sewing circle with an unbelievable name that they should probably copyright. Would you or would you not join that particular sewing circle, Laura Bricker?
I would definitely join the Snitches Get Stitches sewing circle. It was just, the setup was amazing. I mean, I love that expression anyway, but when they show up outside of the store and there's actually a sign like Snitches Get Stitches, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then Steve Martin is trying to, do his like fake crying thing to, get them in, and and at one point they're like, are you trying to go to the bathroom or something? Like what's going on there? And then you get there and there's just all these, I don't know what is going on. I'm really sorry about my levels, you guys. I'm holding it and it says I'm at 0.42 and it's just going haywire.
Maybe you just stop holding it.
Yeah.
That might be
what if we
the
could
hold.
we'll just live with your levels for now.
Okay. Well, then they just go up even higher when I stop.
Well, then pull them down. But if you're holding it, it might that might be doing something.
Okay. So when they go into that back room and then they piece together Ben Glenroy's visit to them, and and you kind of live through this sort of recreation of and they're how he went and was working with them, and then he calls them on that night because he really wants them to come to his show. But at the end, my favorite part where they're like, oh yeah, we didn't know they were just like little old ladies. We thought you guys were like sex workers. And this one lady's like, well, I used to be, or whatever she said. That was a fantastic part of that. So yeah, that was definitely there was sometimes this season there wasn't quite as much comedy for me as there had been in past seasons, and that particular scene and that particular part of this really brought that back.
So Toby, what do you think about the way that they've sort of moved away from the podcast itself being sort of the central point of Only Murders in the Building? Because that was the conceit of the show initially, right? For fans, who are true crime podcast listeners, to see, a true crime podcast featured in the center of, this fanciful building and these 3 characters. But they've really moved away from that. Do you think that's working?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really blame them for doing that, because I think, that little like hook wasn't what made the show work. And as a matter of fact, I think if you just kept doing it season after season after season, where you had to show them like narrating into a mic and just talking about this little podcast stuff, that seems like that would just get tedious or whatever. I do miss a little bit of the stuff where they have sort of fans who are sort of like, I don't know if it's really a Greek chorus, but they're responding to things that happen, and there's this sort of commentary that's going on about their progress. So I missed that a little bit. Like, I thought that was kind of fun. And then also just sort of their a lot of meta stuff about how true crime podcasts are set up and how that's kind of reflected in the actual crimes that they're investigating. And again, I thought that was pretty clever, and I wish they had kind of kept going with that. But for the most part, like framing everything around, we're going to make a podcast. You know, I think moving away from that was probably the right move. You just, they touch on it every once in a while, so you know that it's happening. But I don't think anymore you necessarily need to see the sausage being made in that way.
I think you're right. I do miss the meta aspect of it. I mean, there is something to them having a product that they are creating about this that is, I don't know. I mean, I'm probably just being like navel gazy because it works for me. There are so many jokes that were part of that in the first season that really worked, and there's so much sort of like happening and changing, and conversation around the true crime podcast space now that I do feel like there's material there that they could be using. There could be like some ethical, there could be some jokes about sort of like the ethical problems in true crime. There could be some, some comedy around, there could be some like satirical characters sort of based on some real people in the true crime space, which they did some of in season 1, and I really enjoyed that. But I agree with you that it's not fundamental. It's not as fundamental necessarily as them like going to the pickle diner has become fundamental to me as a place, a sense of place. I mean, the sense of place in this show is critical. It's not so much a New York podcast as it is. I mean, it's not so much a New York setting as it is a New York dollhouse setting, sort of like we're just in New York this weekend, Kevin, and it's like every time I go to New York, I'm not thinking that I'm in the world of the Arconia, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very different kind of place than what you see. I don't know. I mean, Kevin, what do you think? Do you really, really miss the podcast content?
Well, a little bit, but as I touched on earlier, I think that it would become stale if that's all it was. And so, yeah, I think it was creatively a little brave to move to something, and something is sort of, unconventional as setting this in in the middle of a musical. So, I'm, it could have been a little more podcast, but they used it. They used the podcast itself in a way that creates tension and conflict between the three main characters. And yeah, I mean, I guess we don't, and then we had our big cameo from Tina
Matthew
Fey.
Broderick.
Yeah, but Tina Fey, what is this? Cinda Canning.
Yeah.
Cinda Canning.
Yeah.
I mean, that actually was a good joke though, Laura, because it's like she sort of represents the sort of the canceled person who kind of comes back in sort of wellness space.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
What did you think of that?
She did the work. She did the work.
Well, with the blonde hair.
Yeah.
She was taking what was it, like mud baths or something?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I thought that was, especially since we've just been talking about the wellness community and coaching and all of that. I was like, oh, look, she's reinvented herself.
Exactly.
So I think there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek references to a lot of pop, things that we see that we talk about in podcasts and documentaries that we review that some of us might roll our eyes at and be like, oh, that's kind of stupid. Like I can't, but I like the way that they do it in a funny way. In the way that they poke fun at these sort of stereotypes.
Right. What did you think about Donna's baby delivery while she was on a work phone call on that giant ass cell phone?
That was amazing. Because
giant
it's
ass baby.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's just like, she's like talking away and she's perfectly dressed and coiffed. Everything is looking great. And then they're like, you've got to push. She's like, I got to go. And like, I'm like, oh my gosh, if only it was that easy.
I'm producing.
Yeah.
I'm reproducing.
All right, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out season 3 of Only Murders in the Building?
We have a poll going on, and we've asked folks what their reviews are, and we have 100% thumbs up, 0% thumbs down for season 3 of Only Murders in the Building.
Wow, let's see if we break that streak or not. Laura Bricker, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for season 3 of Only Murders in the Building?
Yeah, I'm going thumbs up with this. I love this show. I mean, there's obviously each season, there's things you can pick apart. You're like, okay, maybe this, like the ending, I felt like wasn't as much of a twist as I was hoping for at the end. I mean, I did feel like the reveal of who the actual killer was after the strength of the rest of the season fell a little bit flat for me. But it doesn't matter because I just love the show. So I loved the additional cast of characters, people that came in. You know, we had Kimber, who's making her serum with like ginger ale and Vaseline in the theater. You've got the White Room was amazing. Ben Glenroy, who is just embodying the douchebag actor role that he, you know, is playing in this. And, you know, I think the three main characters, but the addition of Meryl Streep this season really knocked it out of the park. So thumbs up.
Toby Ball, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for season 3 of Only Murders in the Building?
Yeah, I'm a thumbs up too. You know, it's if you like the first 2 seasons, you like this one as well. It's sort of got a unique feel. You know, clearly it's something that really good actors want to be in. Because even like the bit parts are played by, you know, people who are just great actors. So, you know, this one took a couple episodes for me to kind of like get invested in or whatever. After the first episode, I was like, I don't know. But stuck it out. And then there's like, you know, every season's got like these great moments that you just don't get in other shows, largely around Steve Martin. But and this one had him too. So yeah, I mean, it's not, you're not going to be like, wow, I didn't see, you know, that coming from this program. But you know, if you like the first 2, you'll like this one as well, and it's a thumbs up.
Kevin Flynn.
Yeah, I'm going thumbs up as well. By the way, breaking news, it's been renewed for season 4.
Yay!
Even if you got, you know, sort of the cliffhanger at the end there. Yeah, I think it was great. It was great. It is not, you know, it's not about podcasting, even though it was, you know, that was, you know, it made it very personal for us to see it play out that way. It's always been about these 3 characters and what they're going through, their struggles, and that makes the comedy more poignant as well. It was put together really great, and you know, as far as the mystery goes, wasn't that bad. Again, I thought I had figured it out, and of course I was wrong. So maybe I'm
good guess though.
It was a good guess. It was definitely a good guess. These are 3 great actors. They have been praised critically, and not just by Crime Writers On. No, I'll never get over Steve Martin not following me on Twitter, and I will never be able to because it's X. It's so sad.
You know, if you ask nicely, maybe it'll happen. That's how Toby got it.
Yeah, I know, but Toby pandered more. I don't know. I'm pandering pretty hard, right?
No, you just have to. Toby literally said, "Steve, I would love it." Like, he like asked, like he was not.
I think I said he was the only person I really cared if they followed me on Twitter.
Yeah, like he was just really direct.
He was just really
Do you
direct.
care enough?
I just laid it on the line.
I just can't like really.
I'm so grateful for it, and I check like at least once a week to make sure he still follows me. I still can't believe he follows the show.
I'm sure Steve Martin isn't even on Twitter anymore.
He doesn't care about me. I'm no one.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm not going to trade my vote for whether or not Steve Martin follows me on Twitter because it's just a joy that he's doing this, and I know probably this might be he's kind of into like Only Murders is his last project before he retires and enjoys the spoils of his labor, but I kind of hope that they continue on for a couple more seasons because it's been really great to watch them. But if you haven't started it, go back and finish this season because it's a thumbs up.
Yeah, thumbs up for me too. I love this show. And it's not called Only Podcasts in the Building. It's called Only Murders in the Building. So we should stop complaining about the lack of podcast content. That's not really that important. I've really been paying attention to Martin Short's performance this season, especially since Dan Coyce from Slate wrote that terrible freaking take about him that got rightfully completely ripped apart on social media. Martin Short, yeah, people say he can, you know, be over the top. He can be a scenery chewer, but man, can he act with his face. He is the most soulful man when you watch him, especially if you watch him like with the volume off, you know exactly what is going on with Martin Short. And I have fallen more and more and more in love with him as I've watched this show. And his performance this season, especially his scenes with Meryl Streep, he is acting with Meryl Streep. And he is like bringing it. And I'm just so unbelievably impressed with what he has been doing with the material that he's been given in Only Murders in the Building. To me, like his storyline with her was really the heart and soul of season 3. And given some of the themes that have happened and were sort of woven throughout the season, like that's to me enough of a reason to watch season 3. But despite the fact that it had a little bit of a slow start, it really, really picks up. Of course, Paul Rudd, who we didn't even talk about, is a gem. And I've always been in love with him ever since Clueless. Well, maybe even a little bit before that. Anyway, huge fan of Only Murders in the Building, and season 3 delivered. So yeah, big thumbs up for me for Only Murders in the Building, season 3. Is that it for our polling and stuff, Kevin?
Yeah, that's it for the polling.
Okay,
Yeah,
good. That's going to do it for us. But before we go, Laura Bricker, do we have a cat of the week this week?
Oh, yes, we do. So this cat is a cat that won an award. Now, who knew that a pet insurance company actually gives out an award for cats or pets that have the most unusual claims? So this cat won, and the award is called the Hambone Award, and it has been given out now for 15 years. It was started by Nationwide Insurance when a dog got mild hypothermia after getting stuck in a refrigerator and eating an entire ham. Opened the refrigerator, they found the dog in the bone. Heidi Serrata of the Nationwide Pet Insurance, she's the president of Nationwide's Pet Insurance, told CNN that inspired us to create the Hambone Award for the most ridiculous medical claims that we have had for the pets we insure. So in this case, the cat Giles, who you're seeing there with his lovely trophy, his Hambone trophy, his owners, Caitlin and Reed, said there was only one rule in their New York apartment. So this is a New York apartment theme here. When you're putting the couch back together, you have to make sure that Giles isn't under the couch. Well, Reed's parents were visiting and they were sleeping on the sofa bed, and they'd been very good about this until the last day. They were busy. They were getting ready to leave. They put the sofa together, forgot to look underneath. All of a sudden, Giles is trapped in the sofa with some facial injuries that did need some stitches. So I just thought that was hysterical. I will tell you, when I went to cat detective school, that one of the places they tell you to look for missing cats is like inside couches, because a lot of times they will hide there. But in this case, this cat actually just got stuck there when they folded the couch up. So there you go.
Kevin, it's just like where the remote control always is when I ask you where it is. Inside the sofa.
Inside the sofa.
All right, Laura Bricker, if folks want to nominate their animals, any kind of animal to be pet of the week, cat of the week, especially if they have a Hambone Award, how can they find you online?
They can find me at Laura Bricker on Twitter. It will always be Twitter to me.
Toby Ball, what about you? How can you be found online? I mean, we know Steve Martin was able to find you, so how can others find you as well?
It's at Toby Ball NH.
And Kevin, if Steve Martin wants to follow you, how can he do that?
I'm at Kevin P. Flynn, Steve.
And if you want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram,
Love you, Steve.
You can find me at Reb Lavoie.
Loved you and Roxanne.
You can also follow the show
It
on
changed
Twitter.
your career. It really did.
At Crime Writers On, and I encourage you to join the incredible community in our official Crime Writers On Facebook discussion group. What do you think of the jerk, Kevin? We also have a regular old Facebook page, by the way. Get episodes early and ad-free at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia. You'll also get the Crime Writers On after show, Married with Podcast, Laura Bricker's Leave It to Bricker podcast, and Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast. Father of the Bride. Our theme song was composed and performed by Ty Gibbons. Our line editor is the very handsome Livy Burdett. The
Dead men don't wear plaid.
The executive producer
We'll
of
be
this
able to
fine
do.
program.
We'll be able to do Father of the Bride if you hadn't done Roxanne. It sort of just changed the way, instead of going from that really broad, that comedy that
Kevin
he could.
Flynn. This show was recorded in the Treehouse Yoga Studio above the Mockingbird
that's a whole
Cafe in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi studio, otherwise known as Studio C, the Closet in our New Hampshire basement, where I also get to make a true crime podcast with two old men.
Hey, now.
On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you
later.
Later.